All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting in-depth review. Today, I'm going to be doing an in-depth review of the new G.I. Joe role-playing game Sourcebook Hawks Personnel Files. Now, a quick reminder, if you do enjoy this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. Now, let's talk about this in-depth review. Now, when I say in-depth review, I mean in-depth review. I'm going to go chapter by chapter, sometimes page by page. I'm going to talk about the things that I like, the things that I don't like, the things that I think they do well, the things I think they need to do better. But that takes a long time. Normally more than an hour. Sometimes we get into the 2 to 3 hour range. And a lot of people don't want to listen to a weird dude like me talk for an hour just to figure out if they want to pick up something. So I always have a beginner section that I call, Should You Buy This? I separate potential buyers into three different groups. The first group is a group I call players. Players are people that are primarily, not exclusively, but primarily going to be sitting down at a table and playing a single player character. The second group is a group I call GMs. GMs are people that are primarily, not exclusively, primarily going to be sitting down at a table and running the game. They're going to be designing maps, designing encounters, creating the world that everybody's going to be adventuring in, playing the NPCs. Obviously, they have different wants and needs than the players do. The third group is a group that's often overlooked, and I call them the Lorehounds. Lorehounds may never sit down at a table, but they really enjoy the lore of the setting, the places, the people, the history, all that cool, fun stuff. Obviously, they have different needs than both GMs and players. So, should you buy this? Well, let's find out. The first group. Should players buy this book? I generally start off this section by talking about the different kinds of expansions to TTRPGs. And they generally fall into a number of different kind of subcategories. You have adventures, which are pre-written adventures that you can play. Those primarily tend to be aimed towards GMs. And then you have rules expansions, which generally include what are called just straight up rules expansions. It's just a bunch of new rules. Or another subcategory that I call campaign settings, where it is an expansion of rules, but it also contains a bunch of lore, sometimes new monsters and things like that. But it's specifically designed to help the GM create a campaign in this new setting. There's another kind of book, but I generally don't tend to talk about it too much because when you get outside of the core books, it's not often that this kind of a book is released. But in D&D, they call it the Monster Manual. Basically, the book is a collection of stat blocks of monsters designed to help GMs run combat encounters and the things like that. Most TTRPGs won't release dedicated monster manuals. For the most part, the only TTRPGs I've seen that have ever done that on a consistent basis tend to be Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, which is Dungeons and Dragons with a hat. Most other ones, when they introduce new monsters, it's normally as part of an adventure or a campaign setting or something like that. Having an entire book dedicated to nothing but monsters tends to be something only like the big TTRPGs can really afford to do, because it is a very limited market. So when we're talking about Hawks Personnel Files, for lack of a better term, is a monster manual. The entire purpose of this book is to give you just a ton of threat blocks for your G.I. Joe games from a number of different kind of eras of G.I. Joe. Most of those threats blocks are going to be completely useless to players because you're not even supposed to ever see the threat blocks. You can infer what's on them, but players aren't supposed to be looking at threats because it kind of gives them knowledge that their character wouldn't have. One thing that does make this a little bit unique, Chapter 4, which is 9 pages long, or 10 pages long, is called Player Options, and it does have some new stuff. They have an advanced role, which I'm not particularly fond of, not because it's a bad role or anything like that, but because how they use it. Like if you look at Power Rangers, they have advanced roles too. They have advanced color spectrums. But the way that the advanced color spectrum roles work is they replace your former role. They replace your color spectrum, which again still isn't a perfect way to do things, but it does work within the system. This advanced role, technically it replaces your old role, but it also doesn't, and you have to keep track of 2 different leveling systems, because now you have your full level and then your equivalent level, and it's just much more complicated than it really needs to be. And then there's a bunch of new influences and some new general perks. So there are some things for players in here, but one of the more unique aspects about this, the first chapter, every single G.I. Joe template that they give in there has multiple versions. They have an actual kind of threat stat block. They have a contact version of them so that you can use them as a contact in your game using the Essence 20 contact rules, which I really, really enjoy. And then they have a pre-generated player character sheet so you can play every one of these characters as a player. And that in and of itself creates kind of an interesting dynamic, which again, when I get to that chapter, I'll go into a little bit more detail. But it does kind of give you the ability to kind of play through like classic comic adventures and things like that as the characters that were a part of it, which is kind of cool. It's a little depressing that that only happens in chapter 1, and both chapters 2 and 3 don't have pre-made characters of any of those, but it is kind of an interesting idea. So as far as players buying this book, the book itself, the hardcover version of it, runs for $50 and there is no way that I can, even with the pre-generated characters in there, there's no way I can justify effectively a few pre-generated characters and 10 pages of content worth $50. It's just not possible. For me, there's just not enough in here for players. When we go to the PDF, I have a hard time justifying $35 for 10 pages. That's $3.50 a page. I mean, you can get quite a few tacos from Taco Bell for that, and you will probably have more fun with them than you will the 10 pages that you have in here. 10 tacos for $3.50 is what or not 10 tacos, but quite a few tacos or burritos for $3.50, not $35. You can get you can get most of the menu for $35 at Taco Bell. So yeah, like again, it's not that the stuff in here is bad or anything like that. There's just not a lot of it. I mean, the book itself, it's 172 pages. It's nearly 200 pages, but 160 of those pages is mostly focused on GM stuff. So for only the last 10 pages to be really any use for the player, I just can't recommend this to players. So, moving on. The second group. Should GMs buy this book? So here's where things get interesting. In my last section, I talked about how this is effectively a monster manual for G.I. Joe, which is nice. The last time Essence 20 put out a monster manual style book, it was Finster's Monstermatic Guide to Monsters, and it is one of the core Essence 20 books that I think everyone that plays the system should get, because not only does it have a lot of cool monsters for Power Rangers, which the game itself was severely lacking when it launched, but it actually has a step-by-step guide on how to design threats in Essence 20. Something that I personally think should have either been in one of the core books, or they should have released a fourth core book that was just for GMs that had that stuff in it. I mean, they had to release a free download after Power Rangers came out just to tell us how to read the threat stat blocks, because they forgot to put that in the book. So that was kind of lacking, but Finster's Monstermatic made up for it. So does this do the same thing? Not technically, but it does do some interesting stuff. First things first, not only does it have a bunch of new threats that you can use in G.I. Joe games and kind of tips on how to use them, but it also has 3 different eras of G.I. Joe adventures. You have the first era is called Cobra Strikes, so the conflict begins, something along that line, depending on where in the book you're looking. And that's like the old 1982 version of G.I. Joe, when General Hawk was just a colonel, and other stuff like that. It's like the very beginning of G.I. Joe, and that's also where they have all of the pre-generated character sheets. So you have that. You have the Escalation era, which is when Hawk gets promoted to general and Duke starts taking over kind of field command. They start adding a bunch of new characters that people are very, very familiar with. And then you have the third era, which is reinforcements. And that's significantly closer to the modern era type stuff. I think it's like late 80s, early 90s stuff of G.I. Joe. So in each one of those eras, not only do you have a bunch of new threats, you also have tips and tricks for how to run adventures in those eras. So those in and of themselves, very, very useful. But in addition to that, they have another thing that I don't think has showed up in other books. It might have, and my brain is just completely forgetting it for me. They have these things called advanced threat templates. Basically, they're little collections of perks and powers and gear that you can add on to any of the G.I. Joe threats to kind of upgrade them or customize them, make them do different things. And that in and of itself is exceptionally useful. Anything that allows you to very simply and quickly customize a threat is very, very useful for GMs, because if you're playing the game and the players get into some sort of encounter that you weren't expecting, having to find the exact right template can be really hard. But if you just have a bunch of generic baddies that you always have their template just around, when you get into the conflict, you can go, okay, we'll put 3 generic baddies, we'll make 1 a heavy, 1 a pilot, and 1 a boss. Now we have an interesting combat encounter, as opposed to just, here's some bad guys, make them go explode. So that in and of itself, very, very interesting and cool, very, very useful. Beyond that, however, this is kind of a standard Monster Manual style book that separates the threats into just 3 different eras. So very, very useful. And yeah, and then I believe every single G.I. Joe threat stat block that they give you, they also give you a contact version of them, which again is just exceptionally useful, especially for a G.I. Joe game. Like, G.I. Joe is built around the idea of there are hundreds, if not thousands of Joes around the globe. Your players are only ever going to be able to play one of them at a time. So the contact system, especially for G.I. Joe, really allows the players to still feel special and still feel that this is their story, but allows you to bring in other characters to kind of fill in spaces without it feeling like you have a DMPC that are there. Because technically, with the contact system, the players are still technically controlling the contact. They're just doing that by using their contact points, or whatever they're called. I think it's allegiance points, something like that. So yeah, it's a really great system. As far as like cost, $50 for the amount of stuff that's in here, I think is justified, but it's a little bit much for me. simply because, well, yes, there's a lot of stuff here. It's all threat stat blocks. And Essence 20 is great in the fact that it's nearly impossible to build a boring Essence 20 threat. Like, it's just the way that the characters are built doesn't really allow you to make just a really simple, oh, he goes here, he shoots, he waits to die. They all have something that makes them unique and interesting. So that's nice. But most of these threats take up an entire page. Quite a few of them take up 2 to 3 pages. So when 2 to 3 pages are a single monster, we're still not talking about that many new threats in here. And like I said, the advanced threat templates are exceptionally useful, but they are literally 2 pages. Actually, more like a page and a half, because they have to explain how they work on half a page, and then they put them in. So it's really, they have 1, 2, 3. They basically only have 4 of these advanced threat templates. I would have really preferred 8 or 12 of them to really give the GM a lot of ability to kind of mix and match stuff. And you can make your own advanced threat to templates. Again, if you understand the idea of how to template something, meaning look at kind of the base features of it, take out the specifics and put your own specifics in, you could probably make more of them. But yeah, in my book, I can see you justifying $50, especially if you do like having physical books. But it's a little bit much for me. The $35 PDF, I think, is just a better deal for GMs with the amount of information here. Aside from one instance, if you really do want to play classic G.I. Joe, you're going to get a ton of use out of this. And then I can definitely recommend the $50. So, yeah. Moving on. The third group. Should Lorehounds buy this book? Now, this one gets even more interesting. So, I mentioned this in every single one of my Essence 20 videos. Essence 20 and the people that make it are the absolute best at incorporating lore into mechanics and incorporating mechanics into lore. All of the mechanics in almost every single thing that they make is based on lore. And so because of that, most Essence 20 books, there we go, are very Lorehound friendly. Man, I cannot talk right now. So there's always interesting stuff to read and interesting stuff to look at. In this book specifically, every single one of the threats has a little paragraph about, what they do and everything like that. Most of them have artwork for them. And then each one of the different chapters has lore before you see the threats. They have lore after you see the threats. So this is a very lore-filled book, which I think is something a lot of people don't think about if you're not a lorehound, is the idea that a lot of times monster manuals are the best kind of bang for your buck for lorehounds, because while yes, there is a lot of quote-unquote mechanics in it, every single monster needs some sort of explanation as to why it's there, how to use it, and that all in a good TTRPG leans heavily into the lore. So yeah, I think Lorehounds will have an absolute blast with this book. $50, I can definitely see justifying $50 for the amount of lore and stuff in here. However, again, $50 is still $50. You may want to go with the PDF if you don't mind not having a physical book, but there's tons of lore in here for you guys. So, moving on. So, quick recommendation recap. For players, I really can't recommend spending full price on this book. There's just not enough here to justify that. Maybe get a few players together to team up and buy the book for your GM. Because one person in a group having a copy of this book is more than enough to get all of the player options you're going to want out of it. For GMs, this is a recommendation because there is some cool stuff. The new advanced threat templates are great. All the different threats in here are very useful for you, but $50 is still pushing it a little bit for me. So it's a kind of a soft recommendation for the hardcover at $50, but definitely a recommendation at $35 for the PDF. And then the final group for Lorehounds, there is so much lore in here. It's really, really good, great. I can definitely justify $50 for Lorehounds, and then if $50 is justified, $35 is definitely justified. So if the only reason that you're here is to get a recommendation about whether you want to pick up this book, thank you so much for tuning in. In the comments down below, do you have a particular era of G.I. Joe that you really, really enjoy? Do you like the modern stuff that's coming out now? Do you prefer like the old school version of G.I. Joe before it got as nonsense crazy as it is now? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I think it's time for us to dive into this in-depth review. So, again, this is going to be an in-depth review. And when I say in-depth, I mean in-depth. I'm going to go chapter by chapter, sometimes page by page. I'm going to talk about the things that I like, the things that I don't like, the things that I think they do well, the things I think they need to do better. And as I've said before, that takes a long time. So when I upload all these, I always put in timestamps. I know YouTube would prefer me to say, no, watch it all. Watch it 7 times in a row. But I know people have lives and stuff like that, so use use the timestamps. Look for the sections that are most interesting to you, and then come back later for the rest. Watch it in pieces. Whatever is easiest for you, that is what the timestamps are there for. So, that being said, I think it's time for us to dive in to this in-depth review. The first section, Introduction, is your standard introduction. I think I've said this over and over again. I never get tired of this. Every single Essence 20 book, the introduction section almost always starts with an in-universe introduction. This one specifically talks about the idea of Hawk's personnel files, which is basically the files that are so top secret that their security rating does not exist. The Joes and whatever command structure they are folded into do not admit that Hawk's personnel files exist. And I just love the idea that this information is so valuable that no one even admits that it exists. Yeah, I mean, it's a very standard introduction. It's only like, 4 pages long. It gives you that in-universe thing. It talks about how to use the book, which is pretty standard, and then it goes back over the contact system. So, yeah, simple, easy, fun. Moving on. Chapter 1, Cobra Strikes. This is the earliest version of G.I. Joe. The artwork here is from the really, really early comics. Again, General Hawk's not a general. He's a colonel here. The G.I. Joes, if I remember correctly, the G.I. Joes at this point are specifically an American group. There are no international things. It's not an international organization. It's folded into, I think, the Department of Defense. They're just like a special ops team. They're currently run by a character named General Flag. Slight spoiler alert, General Flag does not survive to the next generation, which is why Colonel Hawk turns into General Hawk. But you basically have one page of like lore, and then you have your stat blocks. And the interesting thing about this first chapter is, other than General Flag, who only has their threat stat block and then their contact information, so you can use them as a contact, Every other character in here has their threat stat block, their contact stat block, and then a pre-generated character block so that you can actually play these characters. And the characters they have here, they have Breaker, Clutch, Colonel Hawk, Flash, Grand Slam, Grunt, Rock and Roll, Scarlet, Counterintelligence. That's another thing that they do here is there are stat blocks here for characters that already have stat blocks in Essence 20. Instead of just reprinting those stat blocks again, what they do is they give a different version of them. So Scarlet Counterintelligence, I believe is basically kind of like her early version of her, and the Scarlet that shows up, I think maybe in the core book up there, is a later version of her that I think might have a higher threat level. I can't remember because it's been a long time since I've looked at the G.I. Joe core book threats. So you have Scarlet Counterintelligence, and then Scarlet pre-generated character, and a contact version of Sis's Scarlet. Shooter, Short Fuse, and then Snake Eyes, Martial Commando, the early version of Sis's Snake Eyes before he became associated with the Ashirikage, whatever that is, Arishikage, there we go. Arashikage, there we go. So they have like an earlier version of him before the ninja aspects of him went crazy in there. And again, they have a Snake Eyes pre-generated player character option and a contact version of him. And then also Stalker, Stealer, and Zap. So every single one of those characters has a pre-generated player character version of them. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't think about when they think about pre-generated characters. For most people, a pre-generated character is simply for either new players or unexpected players. People that kind of show up for game night and you weren't expecting it. You don't want to have to go through the process of building them an entire character, so you just give them a pre-generated character. Or, and this is something that happens at conventions constantly, someone walks into the TTRPG area and they just seem to be looking around, and you go, hey, do you want to play? And they go, I don't know how to play. Don't worry about it. We can get you set up. What character would you like to play? And they show the pre-generated characters. You go, here, give this one. Go sit down at that table. They'll take care of everything for you. Don't forget your dice. So that's what most people think about pre-generated player characters. But that's not really the only use for them. One of my favorite adventures that has ever been written, I have it right there at the bottom. It is called The Madness of Gardmore Abbey. And what it is it's an adventure about this abbey called Gardmore Abbey that was destroyed because someone assembled the deck of many things and drew the ruin card in the abbey. It's a really cool adventure. One of my favorite things about it, in addition to it just having like everything you would want in a D&D adventure, like there's a red dragon fight, there's a beholder fight, you get to go around exploring, the deck of many things is there and you get to collect it. It's a cool adventure. But they also have a rival adventuring party that's also trying to collect the deck of many things that you come into conflict with regularly throughout the adventure. It's really cool. However, it's not the only adventure that deals with Gardmore Abbey. In one of the Dragon magazines, they actually released a prequel to it that explains what happened to make Gardmore Abbey turn into a ruin. Basically what happens is the Abbey is under siege by an army of orcs. And the reason somebody draws from the deck of many things is hoping to give them some sort of benefit so they can stave off this siege. And obviously it goes poorly. But for that pre-adventure, they have pre-generated characters for it so that you can go in and actually play it and have this really interesting adventure where all of your characters are intrinsically tied to the adventure. And I think that's something that a lot of GMs need to use more often, is this idea of you want to give context to something that the players are doing. Do a flashback adventure where all of the players get to play a new character, a pre-generated character specifically for this, and they get to tell effectively a pre-written story, but they still get to make choices. It allows them to play a character that they don't normally play, and it allows you to give them lore in a way that's significantly more useful than, here's a wall of text. Isn't that interesting? So with these pre-generated characters, yes, you could use them for someone that just doesn't want to build their own character. Or, especially since these are all really early Joes, you 100% could use these pre-generated characters for effectively flashback things to explain something happening in your modern campaign, which is really cool. And then because they all have contact perks, when you they all have contact sheets, whatever they call them. When you go back to the future and your players are playing their own characters, you can have them show up as contacts so that the players feel even more invested in it. Things like that, really cool, really interesting, great uses of pre-generated player characters that don't involve just giving them to someone that doesn't know what they're doing. You know, there's a lot more uses for pre-generated characters than just, oh, you're too lazy to make a character? Here's one I made for you. So, yeah. Then after that, they do have a new battle station, which is a uniquely G.I. Joe thing called the HAL, Heavy Artillery Laser. And then a new vehicle called the MOBAT, Multi-Ordnance Battle Tank, which are both, those are both children's toys. Like, I mean, they just sound like children's toys, which is what G.I. Joe is meant to create. Again, they're both exactly what you would expect if you use vehicles and stuff, which, again, G.I. Joe thrives on vehicle uses, so you really should learn at least a little bit about it. And battle stations as well are a very, very cool aspect of G.I. Joe. They give you a new thing that you can do and have cool things going with it without breaking the game. And then we get to the enemies, and these are just stat blocks. So you have Baroness Intelligence Operative. Again, a lot of these characters already have threat box. So this is just a different version of the Baroness. One of the things they mention in one of the kind of intros to the chapter is, well, if you are playing a G.I. Joe game and you want, like, the Baroness and Destro team up a lot in the comics. If you wanted to pair up the Baroness and Destro with the stat blocks that are in the core book, that's going to be an incredibly difficult battle because their threat level together is something like 27. Like, it's really, really high. So they created a lower level version of both the Baroness Cobra and Cobra Commander in this one, so that you can kind of combine them with different things, so that you can have these like duo boss battles and stuff like that. Because I believe both Baroness and Cobra Commander are really high threat levels in the core book. So, yeah. And then we get into the advanced threat templates. This is the thing that I think is probably the coolest part about this. Basically, what they are is they're a collection of perks, powers, and gear that you just add on to a stat block to kind of change it. For example, they have the boss template. It increases the threat level by 2. The perks are convincing. His character may not be the smartest, but they're good at convincing others otherwise. Choose a social-based skill. They gain an upshift of a certain amount to skill test with that skill. Additionally, they gain a bonus to cleverness. And then survival is imperative. Part of staying in charge is fighting off other characters vying for leadership. This character gains upshifts on attacks and an increase in health. So those are the two powers, or the perks. And then the powers, they have a standard action power, which is called Delegate. A great leader can spot the best choice for a job. An ally gains an additional standard action on their next turn. Or Take Charge. As a leader, this character believes in the abilities of their followers. An ally gains an upshift on a skill test. So, and that's a move action. So, by taking any character and just putting the boss template on them, you have just created a leader type character that can now command their allies to do cool things. They can help them succeed. They can do a lot of cool things simply by just taking this boss template and putting on to literally any threat block that already exists. So very easy to kind of customize things and make for interesting encounters. One of the other things they talk about in here is the idea of using one of these templates like mid-combat to basically show a transformation or sometimes. So the example they give here, if Dr. Mindbender strapped himself into a portable brainwave scanner, you could apply the Genius template to show how it enhances his already exemplary brain. So this is not exclusively, oh, I have to use it on grunts or something like that so that, no, you can just use this to show how the character is changed in the environment in some way, shape, or form. Now, the only bad thing about it, there's only 4. There is the boss template, the Genius template, the heavy template, the pilot template. I would have liked to see more, but it's a nice start. I would love to see advanced threat templates show up in later G.I. Joe books. I'd love to see them show up in Transformers and Power Rangers books as well, because this is an exceptionally useful system for GMs that allows modifying monsters on the fly. I've said this multiple times in this video. I'm going to say it again. Essence 20 makes it very difficult to create a boring threat. However, that also means that creating threats does take a little bit more time than some other systems where you can just, like Cypher system, I just choose a challenge rating and that's all I have to do. I have a threat right there. It's massively simple. I can make them more complicated, but your basic threat is just challenge rating and then decide what kind of weapon they use, and that'll tell you how much damage they do. Easy, simple, you can just go with it. So with these templates, it does take a little bit of that effort required in creating threats on the fly. So yeah, I really, really love it. I think it's great and awesome. And then the last section, Cobra Strikes era campaigns, basically just giving you kind of tips and tricks on how you can run adventures and entire campaigns in this era of G.I. Joe. So, moving on. Chapter 2, Escalation. So, this is the era where, what was his name? I've already forgotten the name of the general. General Flag, there we go. So this is the era after General Flag. General Flag is no more. Colonel Hawk has been promoted to General Hawk. And now, in-field command is delegated to Duke, who's a very, very well-known character. I believe the majority of G.I. Joe's lifespan at this point, Duke has been the field commander, while General Hawk has been the one that's commanding people from a desk. So this is where it starts feeling more familiar with fans of later versions of G.I. Joe. This is also where a few pretty well-known characters show up. Things like Roadblock shows up, Torpedo, Snow Job, Gung Ho, Doc, Tripwire, all those characters that a lot of people are familiar with. This is the era that they kind of start showing up. If you want to know how popular they are, Duke was Channing Tatum's character in the G.I. Joe movie. Roadblock was the one that was played by, I believe Roadblock was, what's his name? The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. So these are very, very well-known characters. And so after the kind of introduction, we immediately get into the different characters that exist here. I'm not going to go over every one because these ones specifically don't have pre-generated character sheets for them. They are just threat stat block and then content stat block or contact stat block, and that's it. Yeah, like they're all characters that if you're very very familiar with GI Joe, you will recognize them. Um, they have a new version of Duke, because I believe Duke already has a version of the KKK character in the core book, and they might have a threat stat block in one of the other books too. This one is Duke First Sergeant. So again, young version of Duke. And then yeah, these are really really classic KKK characters. You know, Ripcord, Roadblock, Snowjob. I cannot get over Snowjob being the name of a character. I get that the 80s was a different time, but I mean, really. Just no. But yeah, and then we have another one called Wild Bill. That's not going to upset anybody. And then they have enemies of the era. They have Destro, Senior Strategist, which is a threat level 10 version of Destro. Again, I mentioned before, pairing up high level threats creates an issue, because Destro is supposed to be kind of a boss type character, and having two boss type characters team up at very high threat levels makes for a very difficult encounter. So again, they mention, like, yeah, now high level characters can fight like Destro and Baroness at the same time, or you can use Destro as kind of like a big bad end guy for a lower level campaign, a campaign that never goes above level 10. You can just use Destro Senior Strategist instead of the Destro stat block in the core book. So things like that, still very useful. Then we get to the Escalation era campaigns, just talking about more things on how to run games in this era. So yeah, moving on. Chapter 3, Reinforcements. So again, this moves us even later into G.I. Joe. And I think I got some of the dates wrong. I think the Escalation era actually is the era that started in like 1982, 83. And so that means that the Cobra Strikes era is going to be like the 60s and 70s versions of G.I. Joe. And so we get into the reinforcement era. I think this is your late 80s, early 90s version of it. And again, just like the other eras, you have, you know, a page and a half of like lore and stuff like that. And then we immediately get into stat blocks. And again, these are characters that I'm not quite as familiar with. Things like Alpine or Barbecue or Beachhead or Cross Country. I had a friend who was on the cross country team, and he was a very witty person. And so one day we were on a band trip together, and we're on a bus driving. I think we were driving to DC, and so we're just chit chatting. He goes, "Oh, do you know the etymology of the term cross country?" I go, "No." He goes, "Well, it actually comes from two Scandinavian words, craw, meaning to run, and skuntry, meaning without purpose." And I just found that absolutely hilarious. So now every time I see the term cross country, I just always think, oh, running without purpose. So anyway, yeah, I'm not sure. Like, here's another one that modern children will have no idea what this means, but the name of the character is dial tone. Modern kids don't even know that dial tone is a thing, because technically, yes, if you turn your phone on the dialing mode without dialing something first, there is still a dial tone. But you don't actually have to ever hear the dial tone, because you can call without actually turning the phone into a call anyway. So yeah, just more threat and contact stat blocks. They do have a General Hawk stat block here. So if you want to have the actual General Hawk in there, so they have the actual threat stat block and then the contact stat block for them. And then, yeah, just more stat blocks. Again, it is literally a monster manual. It is just tons and tons of stat blocks. Yeah. They do have another flavor of Snake Eyes. This one is Snake Eyes Ninja Commando. So this is the more ninja version of Snake Eyes. And again, this is a threat level 14 version of Snake Eyes. Plus, they have a contact version of him as well. Yeah. And then for enemies, they have Dr. Mindbender, Omniscientist. And then Serpentor, Legacy General. Now, Serpentor, I know for a fact Serpentor's already existed. I think Dr. Mindbender has already existed as well. So these are, again, different versions of both of those characters. And then the final section, Reinforcements Area Campaign, just kind of talking about how to run stuff in this era of the campaign. Which, again, the dates that they're giving here are 1985, 86, so like mid to late 80s versions of G.I. Joe. And that's it. Moving on. Chapter 4. Player Options. This is the one chapter that I think falls a little bit flat. The first thing they introduce is what's called their advanced role. And the way that the advanced role works is somewhat similar to how advanced spectrum roles in Power Rangers work, where you have to take, you cannot take them at first level. It is something that's designed to be taken minimum at level 5, and I'll explain why in just a second here. And the reason why is the advanced role that they have here is called Old Hand, but in order to take the Old Hand advanced role, you have to have the Done the Impossible general perk, which I'm going to just fast forward here for a second to actually look at it. So the Done the Impossible general perk requires you to have at least 3 successful missions. So you have to have had 3 successful missions before you can take Done the Impossible. And all that does, it allows you to add a story point to the team's pool at the start of every session. And it allows you to take this advanced role. So it's specifically a perk that is kind of just designed so that you can be an Old Hand. And so the way that it works is at level 4, when you get access to a general perk, you choose that as your general perk. And then at level 5, you can just choose to become an Old Hand instead of whatever role you previously had. But this is where things get weird. So you level up in your new role as normal. However, this new role doesn't have its own list of essence score increases or anything like that. So you still have to use your old role's essence score increases. And you also get some of the perks from your old role, but not all of them. And so now you have this new thing that you have to track called your effective base roll level. Which effectively means you get some of the perks from your old role, despite the fact that you don't have your old role, but you get them much slower, and then you also get some perks from it. It just becomes overly complicated. I don't think it's a particularly well designed system. The role itself is fine. It's all built around the "I'm too old for this shit" kind of character. Which is fine if that's what you want to play, but there's other ways to play a character like that without using this advanced role, and there's just too much here that makes it confusing. So yeah, I'm not particularly fond of the Old Hand advanced role as a role in and of itself, and I'm very much not pleased with the advanced role system. If all of them work the way that Old Hand does, where now you technically have 2 classes that you're leveling up, just one of them is leveling slower. No, I don't like that. It's annoying. It really shouldn't be a thing, to be blunt. So yeah. Then they introduced some new influences, which are better. But they're influences. Anytime you add an influence to an Essence 20 game, it doesn't just give you one new character option, because you can have multiple influences on a character. The mix and match aspect of it adds a lot of depth to the game itself. So I always like seeing new influences. And then they also introduce a few new origins. They have a Coast Guard origin, finally. A Marine origin, which apparently was originally printed in the Sergeant Slaughter box set. So this is just a reprint of that one. And then we get the new general perks. Like I said, one of them is Done the Impossible. The other one's one of the ones I thought was really interesting, Disarming Shot. Basically, it is a general perk that allows you to shoot the weapon of an enemy out of their hand. And if you get a critical success on it, not only do you shoot the weapon out of their hand, but it goes off and hits them. Like, that is a really, really cool ability, because you can disarm the enemy and shoot them with their own weapon at the same time. That is such a cool thing to happen in a TTRPG. I love the fact that they've turned it into a perk specifically. There are still rules for how it works. It's not just, pick someone and do it. There's downshifts involved in the fact that you are trying to target something very small. But when it succeeds, it's going to be something that defines that session, because it's just going to turn into something very, very cool. It also means that it works best when you have specialization in what you're doing, and when you're finding ways to get yourselves upshifts and the things like that. So you have the best chance of getting that critical success. And like I said, there's what, like 2, 4... There's about 4 pages of new perks, so there's a decent amount of new perks in here. So, yeah, and that's it. Moving on to final thoughts. Overall, this is an interesting take on a monster manual. Probably the most interesting thing in here is the actual threats that you can throw against a G.I. Joe team are remarkably limited. I think there's a grand total of like 5 or 6 Cobra threats in this book. The vast majority of the threat stat blocks in here are for G.I. Joes, which theoretically you shouldn't be fighting. So either this is a fantastic book for a Cobra campaign, or it's a really great book to have a traitor campaign, where the players themselves are good G.I. Joe characters, and there's a traitor or a mind control thing or something like that where you actually have to fight all these guys. That could be very cool. However, with the contact stat blocks that they have in here, it does mean that every single character that you now have a threat for is now also a potential contact for your players. So it's interesting. I would have liked to see a little bit more kind of customizability and stuff in here so that you can use them without getting really, really creative. But it's an okay book. Probably not the greatest. It's nowhere on the level. It's nowhere near the level of something like Finster's Monstermatic, just with how essential that is to the game. The advanced threat templates are super cool and useful, but there's 4 of them, so it's really not that great. If there had been more stuff like this in this book, this would be another book where I'm like, oh yeah, this has to be a part of your Essence 20 library. For right now, it's cool for the lore, it's cool for the contacts. Beyond that, your mileage may vary. Anyway, that's going to be all for me today. As always, again, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. In the comments down below, what are your thoughts on pre-generated characters? Again, I know a lot of people think they're kind of exclusively for new players or people that just don't have the time or effort to put into making their own character. But now that I've talked about like flashback sequences, do you have any cool ideas for how to use pre-generated characters in your campaigns? Whether you're a player, whether you're a GM, whatever. Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.